I'm always looking for ways to show my cat how much I love her. And with Fancy Feast gems, I can pamper her whenever I want with a savory gravy on top of a gourmet mousse pâté. The pyramid shape makes serving simple, so all I have to do is peel and plate to make mealtime feel extra fancy. And with 2 entrees in every pack, it's easy to turn every day into the extraordinary. Fancy Feast gems.
This episode is sponsored by Friskies, who would like to tell your cats hi. Now, if that didn't get your cat's attention, there is one thing that always does the trick. Just pour some Friskies crunchy food in the bowl and you'll hear those paws come running. Works every time. With so many Friskies choices, you can always bring your cats running from their secret napping spots. There's always more to explore. See for yourself at friskies.com or visit your local store.
The McDonald's snack wrap is back. You brought it back. Ranch snack wrap. Spicy snack wrap. You broke the internet for a snack. Snack wrap is back. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Welcome to the New Books Network.
I'm Chris Holmes, and this is Burned by Books. Here you'll find interviews with writers you already love, like Jennifer Egan and Rebecca Mackay, mixed in with up-and-coming voices like Alexandra Kleeman and Rumaan Alam. You'll find us wherever you listen to podcasts, but check out previous episodes at burnedbybooks.com and on Instagram and Twitter at burnedbybooks. Let's start the show. In Iris Mwanza's captivating debut novel, The Lion's Den, we find ourselves deep in a mystery that will split open a moment in one woman's life and in the life of the country of Zambia. Moving back and forth in time, jumping from 1990, Lusaka, the capital of Zambia, to Nyafonde village in 1985, we follow Grace Zulu, a young lawyer assigned to the case of a queer dancer, Wilbess Bessy Mulenga, who has been arrested by corrupt police under the charge of sex with another man. When a clearly abused Bessy disappears entirely from prison and from the world, Grace's first pro bono case becomes a fight against forces larger and more powerful than she could have ever anticipated. Confronted by structures and institutions of power that see her as less than, and which operate with an explicit homophobia that ignores or excuses violence against Bessy, Grace begins to understand that her one case stands in for dysfunction and inequities that cut to the core of who she is and why she is desperate to find justice in the law and in the society that she calls home. Part detective story, part feminist coming-of-age story, The Lion's Den brings readers an exciting new writer and an unforgettable character in Grace Zulu. It is a novel that takes big risks while treating readers to a story of propulsive excitements, narrative surprises, and beautiful writing. Iris Mwanza is a writer to watch. Iris is a Zambian-American writer. As Deputy Director of the Gender Equality Division of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, she leads strategy and investment for the Women in Leadership portfolio, and she has previously worked as a corporate lawyer in both Zambia and the U.S. Iris holds law degrees from Cornell University and the University of Zambia, and an MA and PhD in International Relations from Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. In addition to her work at the foundation, Iris serves on the supervisory board of CARE International and on the board of directors of the World Wildlife Fund. It's such a pleasure to have you, Iris. Welcome to Burned by Books.
Thank you, Chris. I'm so excited to be here. And thank you for that lovely introduction of the book. I think you nailed it. You got it in one.
Thank you so much. You have a really serious day job, which I just described. And I wonder what in the busyness of that world called you to writing fiction. And how did Grace Zulu's voice first come to you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I do get a version of this, which is, how the hell do you find time to write? I mean, I love it. That's my creative outlet. I think we all need them in the busyness of life, and that includes our day jobs. I love my day job. I get to work in gender equality. So I think there's a lot of parallels and interwoven stories. But truthfully, I started this book way before. So this has been a labor of love for 9 years from beginning to end. And so it really is a lot. A lot has happened over that period of time. But Grace has stayed with me. And I think, you are a writer. You also talk to authors all the time. But there's some characters who insist, right? They insist on their stories being told. And she is a person who is so determined, and she has so much perseverance that in a way sounds a bit bonkers, but she encourages me to be braver and to persevere and to keep writing the story and to finish the story. And so that was part of the process. But I do think that my work, I'm really, really lucky because I have this dream job working in gender equality. And so these two things, they reinforce each other. It's not really in conflict. I'm thinking about it, gender. I'm meeting women all around the world. I work specifically on Kenya, Nigeria, India. And so I have this fantastic privilege, but that gives me a lot of insight and material that I try to weave into this story. And Grace, in a way, is a composite of a lot of incredible, brave people, not just women, but people that I meet. And many of them are vulnerable. And you see time and time again, systems failing the vulnerable. And then also the opposite, protecting the strong. And so in my mind, the big question is like, what are the characteristics? What kind of person continues and is able to withstand and keep fighting? And Grace is that person. And you meet these people, right? You meet them in the world as you go around. And it's remarkable. When you do meet them, you're like, wow, this person is not born of privilege. They don't have there isn't a clear reason why they continue to fight against the odds, but they do.
That's so nicely said. As someone who bridges the U.S. and Zambia in your own life, what were your concerns about writing a book set in a country that very sadly will not immediately pull up images and customs from pop culture or history in the mind's eye of American readers? Did you worry about the Lion's Den standing in for the country's rich history? And how did you manage wanting it to feel on the ground level knowing while needing to introduce some readers to Zambia?
Yeah, I mean, when you're writing, I don't think you can overthink these things too much. But I think it's really important that these are voices and stories that aren't often told. And the narrative internally and externally, I think, are both wrong. Internally, I think the folks want to look back on history and particularly Kenneth Kaunda, who was president for a very long time, 30 years. He was not a democratic president. He was not as awful as some of the despots, but still he was a dictator and an authoritarian and wanted to capture what it was like living in that environment. So internally, but externally, I think there's also very limited glimpses of what many African countries look like. Not South Africa, which people, because of Nelson Mandela, they know a little bit about South Africa, not talking about safari.
Right.
We're not talking, we're really trying to get into educating, I would say, what ordinary life is like in many of these smaller or less known countries. And the problems reflect what is happening right here in the U.S. too, right? You have a lot of powerful people controlling and lots of vulnerable people who have very little control over what is going to happen in their lives. And, at particular moments in time, I mean, the U.S. was a few years ago around George Floyd, where people were like, enough is enough. And in the book, this was sort of the end of the Kaunda regime, where people were also saying enough is enough. We need change. We want systemic change, and we want it now. So that's the backdrop of the story. But also important, I think, for me is to write something that is going to grab a reader and keep them there. I'm not sermonizing. I'm telling them a story which I hope they will find gripping and interesting, and characters who they will love and root for. And all the other realities are percolating in the background, but showing how it affects everyday people, ordinary folks, and particularly the vulnerable folks. Grace, even though she's a lawyer, she's from a very poor background. This is her first year practicing. She's struggling, to survive and pay her bills, yet she still is a defender of Bessy, who, sits on the other side of, there's a point where I describe a very thin line that separates the two.
Yes, that's right.
Grace is on one side of the table of misfortune, and Wilbess is on the other, being her client, being imprisoned, being in a very, very bad state, and he's just a kid. And, the only person protecting him is Grace.
Yeah, who's just literally stepped out of law school and is trying to find her own footing and finds herself.
And that's part of it. She's inexperienced, so she makes a lot of mistakes. But that's also part of what makes Grace, I think, an interesting character. She's funny without knowing that she's funny. She's not trying to be funny, but she ends up in situations. I mean, some of them are, serious. They're quite dark, but in a lot of situations there is humor. And she's sort of like, what? What's everybody laughing about? I don't quite get it, but the reader will get it.
The chapters that give us Grace's past show us some of the trials that she goes through, and specifically to simply stay in school. So many of her female classmates drop out and are quickly married. What does education mean for Grace in particular, and how does her story speak to a need for open access to education for women?
Oh, education is everything. Education is everything. I mean, this is what I see in my work, but also in my own life. And I'll tell you, my father's generation, at that time, there were only schools for boys. There were no schools for girls. So my father, I had mentioned he is a Cornellian and the real pioneer, but he got a PhD in economics from Cornell, yet none of his sisters were able to go to school and remain subsistence farmers their whole lives. So all my uncles and my dad were educated, and my aunts, who were equally, if not more brilliant than their brothers, had no access. So I see this in my own life that, my ability to have gone to school, great schools, was because my father was born a male. Had he not been, then our generation, my siblings and I, would be the first to go to university. And I think that probably would have been much more challenging, much more difficult. So this is really super important. This is what Grace is fighting so hard for, because she sees it. And then the rest of the village, including her mother, don't see it. They're like, this is a crazy pipe dream to go to university. How are you going to manage this? It's not going to happen. So let's keep let's keep it real and get married like everyone else. And not only get married, but the mother has arranged a marriage for her to the chief. And the mother thinks that she's done a good thing, because she's ensuring that Grace will marry a rich man, even though he's an old man and has other wives. But in her mind, she's like, yeah, this is our ticket out of here. And Grace, of course, is horrified.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not doing this. No, I'm not doing this. This is not happening to me. And she runs away and, charts her own path and her own fate. But it's very precarious. It's very dangerous. She's very vulnerable and kind of makes it by the skin of her teeth.
She calls him the old goat. I'm not marrying that old goat. Bessy's queerness is ironically both the thing that causes his arrest and the aspect of identity that makes him invisible to the world of police and even the law. How does that queerness operate in the Zambia of your novel?
I say, look, it's the Zambia of my novel, which is set in the past, but it is also still the Zambia of today. It's still against the law, it's still extremely homophobic. And so I would have loved that this would have been a story about history, but it actually is a story about today, and not just in Zambia, all over Africa and the US.
Finding a new job is stressful. But with Indeed, it doesn't have to be. Just fill out your Indeed profile with your skills, experience, and desired salary. The more you fill out, the better your matches will be. And hearing from hiring managers will be 2 times more likely. Relax. That's your Indeed profile sending opportunities your way. Indeed, the world can work better.
What does every USAA member have in common? Family. We're one big family who supports the military community and their eligible families. And if you, your parent, or spouse served, you could join our family and save big on auto insurance. Visit USAA.com/join today to check your eligibility. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.
I just wondered how that queerness, which makes Bessy very visible and then totally invisible, how that sort of worked into the Zambia of the novel, and also the way in which Grace has to sort of make visible this thing that's very dangerous and very vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, he is persecuted and then prosecuted, and then he disappears. And that is that's a real story that happens all over the continent, lots of places in the world as well. And most of the time, there isn't somebody to tell that story. It just happens, and it's very, very difficult for anyone to get focus the mind or focus attention of the press, or get the government to care, or get the legal system to work. It's really, really, really difficult. And so part of it is, this is the reality of people's lives, that they have, if they want to live a queer life in these countries, they have to be underground, right? They have to hide. They're not able to live their full life. Have their identities authentically expressed in daily life. And the other character, Mr. Patel lives in the middle of nowhere. So he too is living a very quiet life.
He's one of my favorite characters in the novel.
He's a great guy. I mean, he's a hero. He saves Grace, and gets her to university. But again, his life, he lives at the crossroads. He's not in a town. He's not in a village. He's kind of in this no man's land intentionally, because that's the only place where he can exist. And even then, folks come after him. He is reviled by villagers. He suffers extreme discrimination. Part of it is racial, because he's Zambian, but of Indian origin. But most of it is kind of a reflection of society's deep homophobia, and a lot of it is, driven by the church and the churches and the conservativeness.
Yeah, that scene with I believe is he German, the pastor of
yes, Father Sebastian.
Yeah, the scene with the German father and Grace sort of really begging him to look at the heart of Christianity and its core tenets of generosity to those who are the least privileged, and him essentially turning away from that is a really powerful scene. And I wonder what it was like to write that and to kind of take on one of the major institutions in Zambia.
I think it's true. It felt very real to me that we go to church and we hope for answers. And I think, having grown up myself Catholic, I went to Catholic school. So you grow up with a lot of indoctrination and you don't question, of course, as a kid, right? You don't question these doctrines and learnings. And, I remember as a child when my mother told me that she was an atheist and what an atheist is, I burst into tears because I was like, she's going to burn in hell, of course.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, and it wasn't very helpful that I put my mom in fits of laughter because she just, I think I was probably like 5, 6 at that time, and I was just blubbering because she was going to burn in hell, and she was like, okay. Probably was like, I don't know, maybe I should rethink this. Her going to Catholic school. But yeah, I mean, and so part of it, I think many people, as we grow up and we come into ourselves, and especially if you go to law school where you are taught to question everything, and Grace for the first time starts to question these things. And the answer is always around faith, just have faith. And it feels very unsatisfying. And so for her, she has this friendship with Father Sebastian. They're very close, but they have these strong divergent opinions. And they, she's looking at him to say, tell me, help me understand. And, he disappoints her in his answers. I mean, he does redeem himself a little bit later on, but I think fundamentally these are the questions that most folks come to at some point in their life. Like, okay, what, especially when you talk about institutionalized religion and the Catholic Church, and being a Catholic, I feel like, the Church has a lot to answer for. And so far,
yeah, goodness.
Yeah, they have not answered for many, what I consider crimes. I mean, some of them are actual crimes.
Actual crimes, yeah.
Actual crimes. But I think a lot of other lesser known, for example, the Catholic Church's early response in the HIV/AIDS pandemic was, condom. We don't support condom use.
Yeah.
And so that had serious implications, life and death. People die because they're like, well, the church says you can't use condoms, you shouldn't use condoms. Yet, of course, people are still going to have sexual relations. Some people are single, some people are married, and, that had what devastated the population. In Zambia at one point, it was 1 in 5 was HIV positive. And so
oh, my God. Oh,
everybody. And the church, it took a long time before the church came around and said, okay, you know what, we've got to address the reality here. But there were many, many years where they were still continuing with the message of no condoms, no birth control.
This
other issues with that.
Other issues, yeah.
Yeah, but this was immediately about life and death.
This transitions to a question that I had about the way that AIDS features profoundly in the novel. Since it's set in the 80s and 90s when AIDS was ravaging the globe, and AIDS is still very much a deadly virus for much of the world, with the life-saving drugs priced as so as to carve the world again into colonial inequities. Did you want to invoke the memory of AIDS as a present crisis, even as you're dealing with a different moment for AIDS?
I mean, I think it's yes and more. I think there's a lot, there was a time at the beginning of the antiretroviral rollout in many countries funded by the U.S. government under PEPFAR, where there was a lot of conversation about HIV, AIDS, prevention, protecting yourself, using condoms. They were readily available. They were free. All of that has gone away. But of course, AIDS continues to spread. And so I think part of it was, but I think the other part is just, and we've seen it with the COVID pandemic, these just destroy societies and everyone around is affected. There's nobody, whether you're infected or not, you will be affected by family members, by people you love, fear of the unknown, stigma, all of these things happened then. They happened during COVID, a little bit lesser extent, but still. And so just what is the impact on society? How devastating is this? And also, I think part of it was, education around AIDS it's a generalized disease. Anybody can get infected.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, I think particularly in the US, it still has kind of, well, if you're a middle-class person and, you're straight, most likely, I'm certainly not hearing it in the next generation. So it's you can manage it, you can live a full life, but it's certainly something that you don't want to contract if you don't have to, and you don't have to. And I think that educational message of how to protect yourself is missing. But I think, in a lot of places, again, circling back to vulnerability, if you are a vulnerable young woman, oftentimes you don't have a lot of choices. And sometimes, some of it is sexual violence, but again, like if Grace did not have Mr. Patel to come to the rescue, she most likely would have been forced into a marriage with an older man. And that's very real. We know about child marriage. And I wanted to also just interrogate, like, what kind of person can do this to a child?
Yeah.
And what levels of desperation will drive a mother to sell her child, essentially?
Mm-hmm. So Grace's fight brings her into contact with all sorts of, corrupt and devious and perhaps sort of skirting the lines of legality individuals. But what she really learns is that it's also institutions, bigger systems, government, as you say, the church, the legal system, that are infected with bias and corruption. And does Grace's story tell us something about how individuals can challenge and overcome institutions that, as you said, prop up the powerful?
Yes. I mean, we see it time and time again, right? But it's hard.
Yeah.
It's not an easy, which is why most people, sort of have an allergic reaction. It's scary, it's difficult, and there are consequences. And so that's why most people don't. But I was really interested in building a character that would still keep going.
Mm-hmm.
As she believes in justice. She really, really believes in justice. In the beginning of the story, she believes in the law, too. But then she starts to realize that actually there's quite a gulf between law and justice.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be a bridge and a tool and a vehicle to get there if you are, and at least in her mind, she's like, if you are smart enough and you persevere enough and you just keep going, you'll find the way. You can use the law. And sort of towards the end, she is in court and she is using the law as best she can to bring justice, or at least a measure of justice, to Bessy and Bessy's life, and just raises him as a person, a whole person,
Mm-hmm.
not an invisible person, a person that society might have tried to make invisible, but he is not.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso Virtual Coffee Machines. Ready to enjoy the bold flavors of barista-quality Nespresso iced coffee at home? Simply fill a glass with ice and press the brew button on your virtual pop machine to enjoy rich double espressos roasted to stand up even when chilled. Refreshingly bold iced coffee. Refreshingly easy to make at home. Visit Nespresso.com to shop now.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
That's so nicely said, and such an important thing about the possibilities for something like the law, which, I mean, I think we see in the States all the time, is constantly not doing that, constantly not seeing the whole person and treating someone as visible and allowing society to relegate them to the corners of invisibility. But I think Grace is such a beautiful example of how an individual's fight can bend these very intractable and powerful systems towards something like visibility in the form of justice. It's one of the reasons I like the book so very much. And I wonder, with your work as in gender equity, it would seem to have enormous overlap with Grace's individual fight. But you are able to sort of call upon more resources than Grace, for sure. But these bigger questions of gender and misogyny that are built into societies, how has that kind of work of the day job influenced your fiction and influenced Grace's story?
I think it reinforces what I know from my own life and see, I'm a Black woman, immigrant. So interestingly, growing up, you deal with more sort of sexism, but you're part of the majority. So then you move, I moved to the US, and suddenly you're part of a minority. So now you're dealing with racism and, anti-immigrant sentiment, which sort of rises and falls over the, different periods of time. And so that, and then through my work, because I'm working on those 3 countries I mentioned, India, Kenya, Nigeria, I see how it continues to play out, how discrimination, how systemic failures continue to impact women. My work is focused on women, but, I see beyond women, it's really, I look at societies as inclusive. I look at everybody as who are the vulnerable people in these societies, women, children, teenagers, oftentimes, and how can the systems, where are the opportunities, where are the levers, where our work at the Gates Foundation can help. And it's not easy. I mean, even with the power and financial might of one of the biggest foundations in the world, is still very, very difficult work, because you're talking about these big, long-standing institutions and powers that oftentimes they're the ones that are actually invisible, and yet they are moving things and pushing things and investing as well, lots of money in continuing regressive laws, policies, systems that maintain the status quo. So it's almost like we're all kind of locked in this battle. But that's one of the reasons why I love books, right? A book allows you to have a conversation in a completely different way. It's one-sided, but, through the characters, if a person gets to the end of the book, that's an opportunity to change their mind.
I'm so glad that you said that. I think that I feel that in your book, and it's such an important thing for me to think about books as having that ability to forge a conversation that's sometimes very difficult in other places. And I certainly wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think that was something that could happen. And so I'm so glad that you said that. And speaking of books that are profound and meaningful to us, before I let you go, Iris, I'm wondering if you would share some things that you've been reading and finding meaningful recently.
Yeah, so one book that has really meant the world to me is a book called Fee by Alexandra Fuller. And it is a memoir, and she's talking about the loss of her son. And she's my best friend. And I loved this beautiful, beautiful human. He was 21 years old when he died suddenly.
Oh, my goodness.
So, but the The gift.
What was her first memoir called?
Let's Not Go to the Dogs Tonight.
Yes, that was an incredible book. I'll have to read Fee as well. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but it's a roadmap out of grief. And so I think for anyone who has lost somebody close to them, a loved one, I think this is essential reading. And, it's heartbreaking. It's a heartbreaking book, but she comes at it with, at the end of it, you have a plan, and she brings humor. You will cry your little eyes out, but you will also laugh. And I think it's her best book yet. As painful as it was for me to read it, I also, having lost a sibling, not recently, but still, I think it's just really, really, really a great instruction on how to survive.
That's beautifully said. I remember that first memoir, and I remember how incredible it was and how much it stayed with me. So I'll be looking out for Fee.
Yeah, and she is a masterful writer.
Mm-hmm.
She is really, really, really good. I think she's written, I think this is her 6th book.
Oh, wow. I really am behind.
Yeah, so you have a few books to catch up on. And I'll give you another one that I've just finished as well. It's called Greenland by David Santos Donaldson. And it's a wild ride. It's a wild ride. It's sort of one of those that I cannot do it justice by trying to, in 1 minute, tell you what the story is. But it's so creative, so imaginative, so original. And it goes from Brooklyn to modern-day Brooklyn to Cairo, I think, in the 1930s, and then back to Greenland. And it sounds like it's all over the place, but it's not. And it's just a beautiful, original story that I enjoyed from beginning to end. And yeah, so I can give you one more as well.
Okay.
One more that I really enjoyed is Foster by Claire Keegan.
Oh, I've been meaning to read this. I'm glad you liked it.
Oh, it's so good. I mean, she has these series which are really, really quick reads. The other one, she wrote Small Things Like These. Beautifully written. I mean, they're a masterclass in writing. She only puts on the page what is truly essential, but the storytelling is so powerful. I think they're about 100 pages each, and she just blows my mind in terms of her craftsmanship. I think in a way, like the shorter the story, the harder it is.
Yeah, and to be spare, but be able to be powerful and spare is that's something.
Yeah, that's her gift. That's her gift, and
these
I enjoyed those 3.
And these 3 couldn't be more different from each other, but they all sound fantastic. But the book that I really want to recommend today is Iris Mwanza's The Lion's Den. You will not be disappointed to find this in your local indie, a propulsive story that has such a bigger vision while giving us a character that we will hold on to for a very long time. And it was a real pleasure to get to talk to you about your work, Iris.
Thank you, Chris. The pleasure was all mine.
Well, that's all from me for now. My thanks to Iris Mwanza for coming on to talk about her debut novel, The Lion's Den. You can find links to purchase The Lion's Den and all of Iris's recommended books at the website, burnedbybooks.com. At the website, you'll find all of our previous episodes, links to buy a podcast t-shirt, and ways to get in contact. As you listen, take a moment to rate the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. And until next time, this has been Burned by Books.